Ladies, let me tell you something most people don't understand about love, attraction, and power. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not losing. Silence is strategy. And when used the right way, silence can do what arguing, explaining, and chasing never will. Because silence makes a man think. Silence makes him wonder. Silence makes him feel your absence louder than any words ever could. Most women talk themselves out of being valued. They explain too much, forgive too fast, and respond too quickly. But the moment you master silence, the dynamic changes. He starts leaning in instead of pulling away. He starts thinking about you when you're not even around. And that's when addiction begins. Silence creates mystery because the human mind is naturally drawn to what it cannot fully understand or immediately access. When you speak less and reveal less, you allow space for imagination to take over, and imagination is far more powerful than information. When everything is explained, clarified, and laid out clearly, there's nothing left to wonder about. But when silence enters the picture, questions begin to form. He starts asking himself what you're thinking, how you really feel, and why you're not reacting the way he expected. Those unanswered questions stay with him, replaying in his mind long after the moment has passed. Emotional curiosity is born when expectations are disrupted. When a man expects immediate reassurance, instant replies, or emotional explanation, and instead receives calm silence, his emotional system is thrown off balance. He becomes alert. He becomes focused. Silence signals that something meaningful is happening beneath the surface, something he hasn't figured out yet. And the moment he feels he hasn't figured you out, his attention sharpens. He listens more closely. He observes more carefully. He starts investing emotionally without realizing that he's doing it. Silence also shifts the power dynamic in subtle ways. The person who speaks less often holds more control over the emotional direction of the interaction. When you don't rush to fill every pause or explain every feeling, you allow him to step into that space. That space becomes uncomfortable for him, and discomfort pushes action. He begins reaching out, asking questions, seeking clarity, not because you demanded it, but because the silence made him feel the gap your words used to fill. Emotional curiosity grows strongest when someone feels they might lose access to you. Mystery doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means being selective. It means understanding that not every thought needs to be spoken and not every emotion needs immediate expression. When you pause instead of reacting, you give yourself control over your emotional energy. That control becomes visible even when nothing is said. He senses in your calm, in your restraint, in the way you don't chase validation. And when a man senses emotional self-control, it triggers respect, which quickly turns into attraction. Silence allows him to project meaning onto you. When you say less, he fills in the blanks with his own thoughts, feelings, and desires. He begins attaching his emotions to your absence, your quiet moments, your non-reactions. This is where emotional attachment starts forming. He's no longer responding to what you say. He's responding to how you make him feel. When you're not saying anything at all, his mind starts connecting you to anticipation, tension, and curiosity, which are the emotional ingredients of obsession. There is also strength in silence that speaks louder than reassurance ever could. When you don't over-communicate your value, it implies that you already know it. That quiet confidence makes him question his own position. He wonders whether he's doing enough, whether he's meeting your standards, whether he's at risk of losing you. Those thoughts pull him emotionally closer because people naturally move toward what feels slightly out of reach. Silence prevents emotional overexposure. Where everything is shared too quickly, emotions lose their impact. But when emotions are revealed slowly, with pauses and restraint, they gain weight. He starts paying attention to your tone, your timing, your presence. He notices changes because silence makes changes noticeable. And once he starts noticing, he starts caring. Emotional curiosity thrives on uncertainty, and silence introduces just enough uncertainty to keep his attention engaged. It keeps him thinking about you during quiet moments, replaying conversations, analyzing pauses, wondering what you meant or didn't mean. That mental engagement keeps you present in his thoughts, even when you're physically absent. Silence turns absence into presence and curiosity into emotional attachment. Delayed responses increase value because they signal that your life does not revolve around waiting for someone else to act. When every message is answered instantly and every call is returned without pause, it creates the impression that access to you is unlimited. Unlimited access reduces perceived value, but when responses are thoughtful and not rushed, it subtly communicates that your time is structured, your attention is selective, and your energy is not freely available to anyone who asks for it. That shift alone changes how a man emotionally positions himself toward you. A delayed response is not about playing games, it's about allowing space. Space gives emotions room to breathe and grow. When he sends a message and doesn't hear back right away, his mind begins to fill the gap. He wonders what you're doing, whether he's a priority, and how important he truly is in your life. That wondering creates emotional investment. The mind hates uncertainty, and when uncertainty appears, attention sharpens. He becomes more aware of you, because he doesn't have immediate confirmation of your availability. Immediate replies often come from a place of emotional urgency, and urgency can unintentionally signal need. Delayed responses, on the other hand, suggest emotional stability. They show that you are calm, grounded, and not dependent on constant communication to feel secure. That emotional steadiness is attractive because it feels safe and confident. A man is naturally drawn towards someone who appears complete within themselves, rather than someone who reacts instantly out of fear of losing connection. Time also plays a role in desire. When something is always available, it stops feeling special. But when access requires patience, it becomes more meaningful. A delayed response makes your attention feel earned rather than automatic. When you do respond, your words carry more weight because they are not lost in a flood of constant interaction. He starts paying closer attention to what you say because he doesn't hear from you all the time. Scarcity, when natural and healthy, increases appreciation. Delayed responses also shift the emotional rhythm of the connection. Instead of reacting on impulse, you respond with intention. That intention creates balance. You are no longer being led by the pace he sets. You are establishing your own. When he notices that you are not immediately reacting to everything, he begins to adjust his behavior. He becomes more thoughtful in what he says, more intentional in how he reaches out, because he understands that your attention is valuable and not guaranteed. There is also a psychological effect tied to anticipation. Waiting creates emotional buildup. When he finally hears back from you, there is a small release of excitement. That emotional spike becomes associated with you. Over time, his brain begins linking your presence with reward, which strengthens attachment. This happens naturally when communication is spaced in a way that allows anticipation to form instead of being constantly satisfied. Delayed responses protect your emotional energy as well. When you give yourself time before replying, you respond from clarity instead of emotion. You are less likely to over-explain, over-give, or say things you later regret. That restraint maintains your dignity and self-respect. He senses that you are not easily pulled into emotional reactions, and that composure elevates your value in his eyes. Consistency matters here. Delayed does not mean disappearing or being cold. It means responding in a way that reflects your priorities. When your responses are steady, but not immediate, it creates trust. without dependency. He knows you will respond, but he also knows he cannot control when or how. That lack of control keeps him engaged, attentive, and emotionally alert. Over time, he begins to mirror your pace. He starts thinking more before responding. He invests more effort because he understands that connection with you requires presence, patience, and intention. Delayed responses quietly communicate that you are someone worth waiting for, someone whose attention is meaningful, someone whose time is respected, and someone whose absence is felt even in small moments of silence. Silence after disrespect is powerful because it immediately interrupts the emotional pattern the other person expects. Disrespect often relies on reaction, raised voices, long explanations, tears, or anger all feed the moment and give the other person information about how much control they have over your emotions. When you respond with silence instead, the energy shifts. The absence of reaction creates a pause that feels heavier than any argument. He expects resistance or forgiveness, but silence leaves him with nothing to push against, nothing to manipulate, and nothing to dismiss. That silence communicates a boundary without needing words. It says that certain behavior does not earn your emotional engagement. You are not negotiating your worth or explaining why respect matters. You are simply withdrawing access. This withdrawal forces him to sit with what he did. Without your emotional response to soften the moment, he is left alone with his actions. The mind begins to replay the situation, looking for reassurance that isn't there. That internal replay creates discomfort, and discomfort is often the first step toward awareness. Silence after disrespect also protects your self-respect. Speaking in the heat of the moment can lead to saying things that give too much of yourself away. Silence gives you control over your emotional output. It allows you to step back and observe instead of react. That restraint signals strength. He sees that you are not easily provoked, not easily shaken, and not desperate to be understood. Emotional control in moments of disrespect elevates your presence and shifts the balance of power. When you go quiet, he begins to question his position. He wonders if he crossed a line that cannot be undone. He starts measuring the cost of his behavior. Words can be argued with, but silence cannot. There is no debate, no defense, no explanation. That lack of engagement makes the message clearer than any speech ever could. It forces him to fill in the meaning himself, and people tend to assign heavier meaning to silence than to words. Silence also removes the reward of attention. Disrespect often comes with an expectation of emotional access, whether through anger or reconciliation. When you deny that access, you disrupt the cycle. He learns that disrespect leads to distance, not engagement. Over time, this association becomes clear. Behavior that results in loss of connection is behavior that gets reconsidered. Silence becomes a teacher, quietly reinforcing your standards. There is a psychological shift that happens when someone realizes they can no longer trigger you. Your silence tells him that his words or actions no longer control your emotional state. That realization can be unsettling. He begins to see you as someone with boundaries, someone who will not tolerate being diminished. That perception often leads to increased respect, because people tend to respect those who respect themselves enough to step back rather than beg to be treated better. Silence after disrespect is not about punishment. It is about clarity. It gives both people space to understand what just happened. It allows emotions to settle so that any future conversation, if it happens, comes from awareness instead of chaos. In that space, he either rises to the level of respect you require or reveals that he is unwilling to do so. Silence removes confusion and exposes truth. The absence of your voice creates a void, and that void amplifies the weight of your presence. He notices what it feels like when you are not emotionally available. He feels the distance, the shift, the quiet. That feeling lingers, reminding him that access to you is not automatic. And that respect is the price of connection. Silence after disrespect turns your absence into a statement, your calm into a boundary, and your self-control into a quiet form of power that speaks long after the moment has passed. Not over-explaining command. Respect, because confidence does not need constant justification. When you explain yourself excessively, you unintentionally communicate doubt about your own decision. You start trying to convince someone else to agree with what you already know is right for you. The more you explain, the more you open the door for negotiation, questioning, and dismissal. But when you speak clearly and then stop, your words carry weight. That restraint signals that you trust your own judgment enough not to seek approval. Over-explaining often comes from the desire to be understood, but understanding is not always required for respect. Respect comes from consistency, self-assurance, and boundaries. When you state how you feel or what you will accept without adding layers of reasoning, it shows that your standards are not up for debate. This shifts the dynamic. He begins to realize that your decisions are final, not emotional reactions that can be talked down or reshaped with pressure. Silence after stating your position creates authority. When you say what you mean and then stop talking, the other person feels the finality of it. There is no emotional bargaining, no justification, no apology wrapped around your truth. That quiet firmness forces him to adjust rather than argue. It places responsibility back on him to respond maturely instead of expecting you to keep explaining until he is comfortable. Not over-explaining also shows emotional maturity. It suggests that you are secure enough to let others sit with their own discomfort. You do not rush to soothe, clarify, or rescue someone from the feelings your boundaries create. That self-control is powerful. He senses that you are grounded, that you are not easily rattled by disagreement, and that you trust yourself. Emotional stability is deeply attractive because it creates a sense of safety and reliability. When you stop over-explaining, you stop giving away your power. Every extra explanation reveals emotional investment that can be used against you. It gives insight into your fears, your triggers, and your need for validation. Silence protects those vulnerabilities. It keeps your inner world private and intact. He begins to see the access to your thoughts and emotions is limited, and limited access increases value. There's also clarity in simplicity. When you explain less, your message becomes clearer. Over-explaining muddies the point and weakens its impact. A calm, simple statement followed by silence is harder to dismiss than a long emotional explanation. It shows that you mean what you say and that you are prepared to stand by it. That kind of certainty demands respect because it leaves no room for manipulation. Not over-explaining teaches others how to treat you. It sets the tone for communication. When he realizes that pushing for more words, more justification, or more emotional labor does not work, he adapts. He becomes more thoughtful in how he approaches you. He listens more carefully because he knows you will not repeat yourself endlessly. This changes the balance of effort in the relationship. Silence also allows your actions to speak. When words are limited, behavior becomes more visible. He notices that you follow through, that your boundaries are consistent, and that your standards are not situational. That consistency builds credibility. Over time, he trusts what you say because he has seen it backed by action rather than explanation. Confidence grows stronger in quiet moments. When you resist the urge to over-explain, you reinforce your own self-belief. You remind yourself that your feelings are valid without external confirmation. That inner alignment shows on the outside. He feels it in the way you carry yourself, in the calm certainty of your presence, in the way you do not scramble to be understood. That quiet confidence becomes magnetic, drawing respect naturally because it is rooted in self-trust rather than persuasion. A quiet, fulfilled life makes you emotionally magnetic because it signals that your happiness is not dependent on anyone else's attention. When your life is full of purpose, growth, and inner peace, there's a natural calm around you that others can feel. You are not constantly seeking validation, reassurance, or approval. That self-sufficiency creates intrigue. He senses that you are grounded, that you have a world of your own, and that draws him in because people are naturally attracted to those who are content within themselves. When you stop narrating every detail of your life and instead live it, your energy shifts. Silence here is not emptiness, it is depth. You are busy becoming, not proving. That depth creates mystery because he can see the results of your fulfillment without being given every explanation. He notices your confidence, your peace, your glow, and he starts wondering what fuels it. Curiosity grows when there is more happening beneath the surface than what is shown on the outside. A fulfilled life also changes how you respond to relationships. You are no longer trying to extract meaning or excitement from one person. You bring meaning with you that makes your presence lighter and more enjoyable. There is no pressure, no emotional weight, no unspoken demand for attention. He feels free around you, and freedom is addictive. People want to stay where they don't feel drained or obligated, and your quiet independence creates that atmosphere. When your life is rich, your standards naturally rise. You're not willing to tolerate behavior that disrupts your peace. That boundary doesn't need to be announced, it is felt. He notices that you do not chase, argue, or cling. You simply continue living well. That composure commands respect because it shows that you value your inner world more than temporary validation. Respect deepens attraction, and attraction strengthens emotional attachment. A quiet, fulfilled life also means you are emotionally selective. You share yourself intentionally rather than impulsively. That selectiveness makes your attention feel special. When you do open up, it feels meaningful because it is not constant or careless. He senses that being part of your world is earned, not assumed. That sense of privilege creates desire and emotional investment. There is power in being unbothered. When your life is aligned, small things do not shake you. You do not react to every mood, message, or shift in behavior. That emotional steadiness creates safety. He knows where you stand, not because you explain it repeatedly, but because your actions are consistent. Consistency builds trust, and trust deepens connection. Fulfillment also fuels confidence. When you are growing, learning, creating, and enjoying your own journey, confidence becomes effortless. You do not need to perform or impress. You simply exist as you are. That authenticity is rare, and rarity is attractive. He feels the difference between someone trying to be chosen and someone who is already choosing themselves. A quiet life allows space for longing. When you are not always available, not always talking, not always present, your absence becomes noticeable. He feels the gap when you are not around. He misses your energy, your presence, the way you make him feel. That longing strengthens attachment because the brain begins associating you with comfort and desire. Living fulfilled without constant explanation also protects your energy. You are not constantly defending your choices or proving your worth. That peace radiates outward. He is drawn to the calm, the stability, the sense that being with you adds to his life rather than complicates it. Emotional magnetism is not created by effort. It is created by alignment. When you are aligned with yourself, your quiet joy becomes irresistible to those who are ready to value it. Walking away in silence leaves a lasting emotional impact because it denies closure in the way the other person expects. Most people are prepared for arguments, tears, explanations, and repeated chances. They are not prepared for calm departure. When you leave without drama, without speeches, without trying to be understood, it creates a psychological pause that lingers. He is left replaying the moments, searching for meaning, wondering what he missed, because silence does not give answers, and unanswered questions stay alive in the mind. Silence during departure communicates certainty. It shows that the decision was not impulsive or emotional. There is no anger to dismiss and no sadness to manipulate. The calmness suggests that the choice was made long before the moment of leaving. That realization hits deeply because it means the shift happened internally, quietly, without warning. He begins to understand that you reached clarity on your own, and clarity is far more intimidating than emotion. When you walk away silently, you take your emotional energy with you. There is no final conversation where he gets to explain himself or soften the consequences. That lack of access forces him to sit with the loss. He feels the absence not only of your presence, but of your emotional availability. The mind struggles with sudden absence, especially when it was once familiar. Silence magnifies the absence, turning it into a constant reminder. A silent exit also preserves your dignity. There is no begging, no negotiating, no attempt to change someone who already showed you who they are. That restraint signals self-respect. He senses that you valued yourself enough to choose peace over chaos. That kind of strength is remembered long after the relationship ends. People forget words, but they don't forget how someone made them feel, and silence makes the feeling sharper. Walking away quietly removes the illusion of control. When there is a loud ending, the other person can believe they still had influence over your emotions. Silence removes that comfort. He realizes he no longer has access to your reactions, your explanations, or your forgiveness. That loss of control can be unsettling, especially if he assumed you would always be there to absorb the impact of his behavior. Silence also prevents rewriting the story. When you don't explain your reasons, he is forced to reflect honestly. There is no argument to win, no defense to prepare. He must confront his own actions without distraction. The mind naturally fills silence with truth when there's nothing else to focus on. That internal confrontation leaves a deeper mark than any confrontation you could have initiated. A quiet departure also protects your future. By not over-communicating, you leave no emotional mess behind. You don't create loose ends that pull you back. You leave cleanly, clearly, and complete. That finality is felt even without words. He senses that the door closed because it needed to, not because you wanted a reaction. There is something haunting about someone who leaves peacefully. No anger to justify, no chaos to blame, no drama to distract from the loss. Just absence. That absence becomes loud in moments of reflection, in silence, in routine spaces where your presence once existed. He remembers the calm, the strength, the way you chose yourself without needing to announce it. Walking away in silence turns your absence into a lesson. It shows that love without respect is not enough, that access is not permanent, and that self-worth does not require explanation. The impact is lasting because silence does not fade the way words do. It stays, echoing in memory, shaping understanding, and reminding him that some losses are permanent not because they were loud, but because they were final.